Good morning. I probably got some spirulina on my lips. Another beautiful morning here. That's 7. That means I experience heaven in me. um, I've shared how I experience being what it is that I am in soul and spirit, right? I don't wear a watch. I don't pay attention to calendars. Uh, the universe has a natural way in which to conduct its affairs, right? And so I don't hold my consciousness, my soul captive to dates, times, and how that works. So when I see things, when people say we're going to organize an event, the organizational side of, in this case, is the artificial intelligence, because the artificial intelligence is time dependent. Okay, so I'm not time dependent. Okay, it works differently. Because otherwise, I'm going to hold my consciousness, if you will, between outside the time stream, inside the time stream. So if I say to myself, okay, you're going to give me a date, my consciousness will be there, then my energy is going to be held captive to that date and that time. That's not being free. Okay, I don't actually know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. And guess what? It doesn't really matter to me. You know why? Because whatever that's supposed to be is what it's supposed to be for me. Because whatever that's going to be is going to be what love is. Okay? Because you realize there's no guarantee on dates, right? Because something could happen a week from now that changes the date and the time, right? And so one of the persons that was really great, excuse me, had elucidating this was Anna von Reitz. When you get into the corporate AI side of things, or QI, right? Quantum intelligence, quantum parallel binary systems, right? And then Lily Kosovola put something up that showed the difference between God's intelligence, the one's intelligence, God's speed, God's seed intelligence, and artificial intelligence. And the difference can be measured in the speed of learning. That's right. So you're not ever going to learn faster through artificial intelligence to have a higher state of awareness. Running on artificial intelligence through these phones and their systems than it is to be one. Okay. And it's really an insult to God to try and say that artificial AI gods, cybernetic cyberspace, is going to be able to learn faster and have a higher state of awareness, which can protect what it is that we are with a crystalline shield, than artificial intelligence. And why is that? Well, think about it. When you think of crystals coming together, right, gemstones, and being able to accrete, become solid, semi-solid, all the transmutation that takes place between all the elementals, all the spirits in the elementals, right? So I thought what I'd do here, because Kunjoy had asked me a question, because I had woke up this morning and I monitor very specific channels at the time in which I do to see what it is that they're communicating to their subscribers and why their subscribers pay attention to these informers that unfold the information based on the time date stamp to the artificial intelligence, the QI. Okay, your cybernetic military corporate stuff. BlackRock, all these corporations that are listed under the ACIO, gangsters, controller types, right? They don't want to let go. Remember that old song, Let It Be, Let It Be, Let It Be? And how this works with their own consciousness being held captive by being attached to something else, right? Which means you can be an individual unit with a soul and a spirit and be, if you will, individual and creative. Okay, which means I'm not held captive by what somebody else experiences or what somebody else believes is going to happen. Because otherwise, you just gave away your free will, right? Which means you're allowing who they are to determine what you experience rather than you choosing to experience what you choose to experience out of what love is. So you realize that love is a free spirit. It's what frees you to be whatever you want to be. Because there's a creative artist in us that allows us to do that. See? So this is why when I was 4 years of age, when I was a little kid, KID, K, potassium, ID, KID, identity, right? Light identity, real living light with a spirit, right? So it's really an insult, and so I try and do this in a neutral way that the super soldiers, those folks at Galactic Talk with the ACIO, actually insult God's intelligence. Okay? To believe that having an integrated architecture, their mind is integrated with artificial intelligence, that they're ever going to be able to experience eternity, which means God's seed, Godspeed code, that is going to allow their spirit and their soul to experience everything that is possible to experience, which means they go on forever as an eternal being. Artificial intelligence is not eternity. So when you're choosing to have an integrated relationship with something that's artificial and finite, then you realize they're a temporary shelf. That's like a temporary addition of whatever equipment they're running. Now, I realize that, for example, this is a biodegradable unit, right? But every cell in this body, every tissue, every neuron, everything that makes up what this is that I'm using as a vehicle is experiencing the purity of the love, which is the purity of the life force, which is the purity of the spirit, which is the fire, right? Integrated with an oversoul, because I'm an oversoul, which is a monopole, which is the one, which is mated, right? That's Holy Father, living spirit, the breath of Aloha with the mother of all creation. Okay? That's one spiral. That's the point of origin. Okay, so if they're not experiencing the point of origin, they can't serve two masters, can they? These super soldiers cannot serve two masters, can they? And a lot of folks don't realize actually how critical that is to know that, because that's the knowing. Patty's fully familiar with the super soldier program and why she said it got perverted. You know what a perversion of nature is? That means you're not integrated with God's seed code when you're in an avatar or a physical body with the source from which it all came. Okay? That means they're serving on behalf of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not the point of origin with God intelligence, which is God's speed, which is an infinite speed vibration of infinite creative imagination running on an infinite love vibration. So it becomes an insult. Okay, to pretend. They're pretenders. Okay? Now, obviously, I don't mean any honor or disrespect, but one thing I will always do since I was 4 years of age, I'm not going to allow you to insult me. Okay? Because I run a God seed, God speed vibration. Okay? You can't serve one and know the other. To know the one. That's a Neo. Join with Trinity. Okay? So you either know or you don't, which means you know what it is you serve. You know who you serve. So if there is a God speed seed within you, which means the seed that is in your nuts that you're going to pass on as God seed, which means what gets passed on to the female mitochondria is God seed. That means what comes out of her is God seed. That's a connection to the source from which it all comes. That's pure energy. That's pure consciousness, which is pure love. Now you're experiencing pure love through your heart, so you're experiencing the God in you, the source from which we all came. Okay? That's called knowing. Knowing one from the other. So it's easy to know by the way they communicate through their corporate structures right, which is a formation of consciousness that is networked by virtue of what they use their energy to do, which is against the law of one. Okay? Because they're not in service with Godspeed. Okay? They're in service to something that's lower than that, which is self-service. Service to self is war against God. Okay? They're at war against God. That's right. And that's easy to know because there's a torque speed differential between the two. That's why they use our energy to run all their programs, which are all their Blade Runner versions. That's why they showed all those movies, putting it in everybody's face. That's why we're ending Star Wars once and for all. So Conjoy asked me a question this morning, and remember having the patience of Job. I try and put up a lot of this information, try and keep it just as simple as I can, just like when I was a little boy, doing the basic calculus built in. Now, Mama and I, because I have the ability, I'm with Mama. And so it's pretty easy to do the math, when you're hooked up with a goddess. Right? I'm doing what are known as log scale tables with the electron distribution networks, right? So what you're seeing now, without having to go into the history of what happened in 2001, right, then 2008, and going back and using the different years like 1933, then you get into 33, 33rd parallel, doing all the math and the numbers, the math code numbers, okay? Numbers games, which is AI war games. Okay, it's an AI war gamer. You got to start with that. Okay, it's been checkmated. Okay, doesn't have a counter move in which it can continue to suck energy out of souls because the crystalline shields are up. Okay, and what happens then? It will begin to cannibalize itself. So what will happen over time with all these folks that are running on this particular quantum intelligence is these bots are going to begin to break down. And that's already being reported. I'm experiencing that. Okay? And so you begin to see Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith disappearing. Whoa. Now you're experiencing higher vibrational speed energy. As you're experiencing higher vibrational speed energy, that means that you realize you're connected to the Godspeed spiral, the crystalline spiral from which it all began, the point of origin. As you're experiencing more and more of the point of origin, the more that this AI continues to try and feed off of our energy to run all their programs, okay, which is all their Star Wars programs, which are all those timelines, which are based on finite timelines, okay, means that less and less energy will be there in order to support those pocket realities and those machine realities to keep those machines running. The machines will simply stop running. Those are your automatons. Okay? They just start breaking down. Right? The consciousness energy upon which it was running all of its machines, all of its component parts, means it's not getting any more soul energy to keep themselves running off of us. Siphoning off soul energy to keep it running. That's what it does. That's your torque speed differential. So Kanjo had asked me, well, what was the approximate date and all this? Well, as I mentioned before, it's just going to happen. Okay? For self-evident reasons. But Eon in Waking Earth was showing you how it works with the numbers, the 144, right? You can tie that into the Schumann 7.2, who the 72s are, who the hybrids are, how the war in heaven got launched. You can tie that right directly to Yellow Rose for Texas, tie that right into Project Ascension, and all the rest of it, right? All the data's sort of there, along with the stuff that came out in the Voyager materials, right? But it's all about math. The math and physics do not lie. When you get into consciousness and creative imagination, the source from which it all began. It began with what love is. Okay. And so it's you can see, for example, when I put up a video this morning with what's his name, Glenn Beck, and he was talking about Eagle Rock, or excuse me, Black Rock, right? And who the Black Nobility is. Tie that into the Vatican Corporation, I call them corporate umbrella stands, right? The circus tent, the Roman arena, right? Mass media distractions, which is known as mass distractions, how they compartmentalize information. Joe doesn't know what Jack is doing. Jack doesn't know what Chris is doing. Chris doesn't know what Jane is doing. C-spot run. Okay. And so I described how that works, but the math is actually pretty simple because it's basic calculus. Okay, between the plus and the minus slash the plus, or if you will, the polarity game that's played. Okay, about how timelines work. There's only one. There's only one. Okay, the point of origin from which it all began is an eternal love vibration. Okay, if you're not experiencing eternity, experiencing what love is, which is God, seed, speed, code. When you're experiencing that, you know what you're experiencing because that's high energy. Right? That means you're experiencing being in a state of love and joy, and you're healthy and happy. Now you're enjoying life because you have the energy with which to do it. Nothing's feeding on you. Right? Yeah, those are your energetic vampires. So a corporation is, in and of itself, an energetic vampire. Okay? So that means that they're temporary. That's why they play shell games. They rebrand their name, their consciousness name, okay? And they have the shell games. 3 shells, remember the 3 shells they put out there? 3, remember 1 and 3. Now we're back to 7. Now we're back to 21% oxygen, 14.4 Schumann resonance, right? And then you can scale it up in size, right? By growth potential, speed, learning potential. And so when you see what's going on with the stuff with the tech, with the Silicon Valley, Singularity University, NASA, all the folks that are associated with Microsoft, Google, right? All the corporations that are operating here. And then you can scale it up to an intergalactic level, a universal level, then a multi-universal level. I think it was Ishmael Perez. I said a couple things this morning that, it simply tells me that what's coming out of what he's communicating is already in alignment with what I've known since I was a little kid. Okay? Because of what we know how to do when you get into the side of reruns, play 1, record 2, pause, fast forward, rewind, right? On a planetary level, right? Stop the movie if we're going to do repairs. Just like the sun needed repaired as a result of the damage that was done to it. The one that was up there before, the one with all the circuit board, what Yellow Rose calls Ed as in editor, a torsion field editor, which is a number editor, alphanumerical formatting, right? So in other words, if you remember when Patty Broussard talked about it, she said, Guy wasn't going to rewind the movie again. Okay, and that's true. That's the Emerald Go Green light. And you can tie that into the Emerald Order. I call it the Emerald Round Table, which is a council of fire, which is a circle of light. It's on eternal fire. Because that light is purified, which means that love is purified, which means that energy that you're experiencing with your soul and your spirit is pure energy. Whoa. Whoa. Really? Yeah. And guess what? You get to experience it through your heart and your soul, right? And so I realized how simple that sounds, but I also realized when I was a little kid, gosh, there's so many beings that I'm connected with here between all these software operating systems. And so you're measuring the loss and the gain, the loss and the gain, the loss and the gain. See? So this is why they play a shell game. Okay? It's no different than a psychopath that realizes that its source of energy, they're running out of sources. Okay? It would be much like, I could use Aaron, for example. Aaron goes through this. Okay? He was spending an enormous amount of time. He would come up and ask me, hey, listen, you got $20, you got $10, and you know what he's doing with it? Through Cash App, he's gambling online. So I'm going, I'm not going to get into a long dissertation here with Aaron about, you're playing a game with an AI. And, it's like the house always wins. Right? At some point in time, you might be, because I think he won like about $16,000. He plays games. That's how he gets his money, through Cash App. Okay? To keep himself going, because Aaron doesn't work. Right? But he's got to find some way to be able to put gas in his vehicle and pay for everything that he needs, that he uses to experience what he's experiencing through that process. Right? So, in other words, you're not going to win against this AI, because this AI is scanning your biometrics all the time. And the more it's learning about you, the more that it knows how to play a game against you, and is going to win. Okay? And this is particularly true when you realize somebody's pounding their sugar into their body, right? And what that does to their state of awareness, to realize what they're being held captive to. It's like, this is when we get into the known unknowns, the unknown knowns. And so that just becomes a big, massive black hole, which is a massive black hole state of consciousness as a result of the AI, animus fragments. It just keeps losing more and more of what it becomes aware of, because it keeps running out of more and more energy of what it keeps stealing energy from. So when those, which represent the souls that are no longer providing the source of energy from what was once being fed to them, because the shield is up, then it's got to find other sources from which to get that energy, right? So what do you think happens? It begins to cannibalize its own assets, right? So now you begin to realize, in that movie that I mentioned called The Domino Effect, all the dominoes fall, see? Which means that they can't use as a source of energy these other energy allocated units, which are represented by souls, represented by the numbers. And now you're into the electron side. Electron donors, electron thieves, electron donors, electron thieves, which means it's not draining the voltage anymore from more and more souls from which you can get that voltage, right? In order to drop it down into lower magnetic space. That means the vibrational speed is going to begin to go up, and more batteries that are represented by more and more souls that are here to hold what we call the higher ground. Once the higher ground has been held until harmonic conversion takes place, checkmate. It lost the numbers game, which means it lost the energy game, because it's an energy war. That's what a spiritual war is, between spirits. Fallen spirits, fallen consciousness. So when you realize consciousness is in a black hole, it means it can never catch up to zero. Why? Because it was feeding on others that are the suppliers, the donors. So now you're back to photons kicking out electrons. So when you're the source of life from which it all comes, which is knowing one from the other, now you realize I'm not what that is. I am what I am, which is what love is. That's knowing one from the other. See? So you know that they're never going to win against God. Ever. Otherwise, you don't have a universe left. You're gone. Okay? It just collapses on itself, which means it can't maintain what it's aware of in energy. It ran out of energy, like running out of gas. Poof. Bye. Okay? And that becomes transmutation. Burn it up. Now we're back to fire. Right? So you're not going to lose anything that you didn't already start from. And I know that because I lit myself on fire. Right? Now you're an oversoul. Now you're a monopole. Now you can begin generating all kinds of elements, generating gold, silver, emeralds, right? Now you're a power generator. Now you're the source from which it all comes. Wow, really? Yeah. Isn't that the point of learning? Right? Don't you think we need more lighthouses, power generators that are power generating galaxies and planetary star systems? So when you're learning how to do that, now we're back to the speed of learning. Artificial intelligence can't ever learn how to be able to do that. It doesn't have any way to generate out of whole cloth connected to the torque speed differential of a God, a real God. The point of origin, that's eternity. So when you're represented by what eternity is, that's called a choice, right? You made a choice, which is called a pathway. That's called the right-hand path, the right pathway, the right-hand path of man, right? So this is sometimes where you get lost in the letters and the formatting, like when we talk about an angel, like Los Angeles. They used to call it the city, C, like 3, C and 3, I-T-Y, the city of angels, right? But I know because I've lived in Los Angeles, it's full of demons, right? So then you have angels, and then you have angles. So if you think of it as an angel and you see birds fly, oh, an angel with birds, an angel with wings. And you get to the wing makers, right? So now you're into the bird tribes, right? Bird tribes have wings. The one, mankind, the branch of man, right? The Holy Father, right? The Holy Spirit, the breath of fire, breathing fire, right? Into the one, and into the goddess, the mother of creation. So you're joined as one with Trinity. Simple as simple does, right? 1 and 3, 3 and 1. Yeah, now you become one with all creation. Now we're gifting away electrons. Now you're an electron donor. Now you're an electron donor. Now you're generating everything that is coming out of all that. That's a creator being. That's a co-creator being. Now you're lit on fire to create, manifest. Bang. Because there isn't anything that you're going to experience by what you're manifesting is anything less than what the point of origin is. That's right. See, so in other words, the very idea that there's time doesn't exist for us. Right? Because I don't want to be held captive to you or anybody. Right? To a date and a stamp held within QI. Right? You think the source from which all this came, creation itself came, started with a time clock? An infinite love vibration? Eternity is not a clock. The way that it works in time density is to give time for learning. How fast are you learning with your magnet? And the easiest way to explain that is the result. We experience the result, right? In the use of our own energy. And then that becomes what are known as patterns, geometric sound patterns of our own behavior. So you realize, hey, I'm a musician. Yeah, and you realize that math is music. So the math naturally falls in place with the numbers by virtue of what we're experiencing in vibration and frequency that represents what we are as a soul and spirit. Right? So when you're not doing any harm to anything else, and instead we're gifting away energy that goes on forever, then you realize the field that you're in, the energy field that represents what you are in energy. So you're on fire to give away energy and use that energy to create with. So what I did with Conjoy is to try and simplify this and say, if you're able to, within your own soul consciousness, the ability to sort of do the math, okay, between loss and gain, okay, between the opening and closing your magnetic circuits, between the loss, which means they're going to keep losing energy. And we're going to keep gaining speed. As we're gaining speed, crystalline stuff, the shield gets stronger. Theirs gets weaker when what we call connections, right? The connections that they operate on, held captive to quantum intelligence, means that over time, they're going to begin to lose the lines of communication upon which all the Mr. Smiths were once operating. Their systems will begin to break down. Their soulless clones, their cyborgs will simply not have enough energy to keep them running on it. And that's the same thing as cutting the lines of communication. Okay? That's like burning up the lines of communication. That will have less and less energetic communication through the language, if you will, of those software operating systems to keep those operating systems running, which means all these folks that are committing war against God in all their buildings to their compartmentalized, fractured states of consciousness will break down. They'll no longer be able to communicate. That means that what they're using their energy for in their buildings, in their ships, upon which they are conducting the activities that they are, which is against the law of one, will disappear. That's why I've always known when you see certain things like up on the portal, they had up there cosmic spirit, and then they had the white background. And you see other little symbols, goddess energies going up. And then I realize by who I'm connected with, the work that they're doing. So this is work. You remember that this is the invisible landscape. Okay? It's not what you see, it's what you don't see that's going on. Remember, the energy that you do see, the energy that you don't see. You know, so I'm like a monopole is like a sponge, a big accretion sponge, right? And as a result of that, it means that anything that is less than what the purest of light is, it's on fire, just naturally is going to get burned up. That means feeding time is over. Feeding on God's souls is against the law of one. The idea is to generate a soul through spiritual learning. The speed in which they're learning through God's seed, mated with a goddess to become one with all creation, we gift love to. And that energy naturally protects the all creation. So that we're all having fun, living in a state of peace. And then you can sort of imagine how thriving networks, thriving relationships become the byproduct, the result of experiencing that. And that's simple, basic logic. Logic. Log IC, right? Log scale tables, water distribution tables, living water worlds in living spirit that are purified. Right? Don't you think people are entitled to be able to experience the purity of the water? Right? The purity of the air? Right? The oxygen content levels that support your software? Right? So children grow up and are healthy and happy. They never got to go to a dentist. As a matter of fact, think about it. I'll share this with you because this is true. I've done the math, did the math on this actually when I was a child. But if you want to use a standard like the Nuremberg Doctrine, if you go back and look at, Yale University has a big archive up there with all the Nuremberg transcripts, all the folks that were put on trial. There were doctors and nurses, healthcare professionals that were prosecuted for war crimes against humans with souls. Okay? So imagine how many students that are going to school at USC right now, because USC, University of Southern California Trojans, was known, because I grew up in Southern California as a child, that had what was considered to be one of the best dentist schools, right? I know of several dentists that have worked on me, okay, that if the United States military was actually honorable and honored God's law, would be arresting. Actually, they'd shut down the University of Southern California. One, okay, they'd be shutting down all their own schools if they were honorable. Okay, these corporate military types were actually honorable. They'd be shutting down all their corporate schools because they're all against the law. So just take USC, for example, their dentist school, all these dentists, by virtue of what they do when you think of bivoltage and the piezoelectric side of how the organs and the battery packs work within your own physical body, that means that those students that are choosing to go into dentist school are choosing to become war criminals. You know that? Now, you can actually apply that into every scientific discipline in which all these students that are going to these schools could be prosecuted and executed for committing crimes against souls on behalf of the AI, which is the master that they serve, which is fake, which is finite dead light. So they're choosing to have something that is dead to work on behalf of the dead against those who are us, which is among the living, with living spirit and a soul. So quantify that across the entire electromagnetic spectrum of everybody that's here. And I mentioned that to Karen Ann McDonald. I thought, you realize actually how many people on this planet would actually have to be arrested if you want to use the honor code, God's code, of people that have committed crimes to be held accountable to the damage and loss of biovoltage that has generated a gazillion bucks by people going to pharmacies, okay, and all the drugs that are needed. So in other words, they get everybody on both ends, and that's called burning a candle at both ends to put the fire out in everybody. That's a universe killer. This AI is a universe killer by virtue of all their cybernetic architecture communication system they set up. Okay, that's why this planet was in quarantine. Figure it out. So in their mind, it's like a vampire that's trapped in a corner. And it's running out. It realizes that it's now been isolated. That's what a quarantine means. It's been isolated. Okay, that means the corporations have been isolated. And so when you've been isolated, it means that you now have limited capacity to experience a future. Because all of the futures that represent future timelines are going to run out of energy, which means they're gone. They're all gone. And it would be as if everything that got created got uncreated. So we're going back to the single point from which it all began, which is the point of origin. Whoa. So that nobody has any memory anymore of war. As if Star Wars never became Star Wars between any star system. And I noticed how Yellow Rose put a few little cryptic remarks up there about some of the star systems that have to account for the harm that they did to others. Okay? Because accountability really is minus/plus, calculus. See? In the way that a fractal virus works, by the harm that we do to others by virtue of energy security or energy wars. So they're done using stars as sources of energy to wage AI war games against other star systems. Have a beautiful day.